The Jedi Order spoke of balance as if it were the most fundamental truth in the galaxy. They taught it to children before they could understand emotion. They carved it into temples of stone. They justified wars, executions, and sacrifices in its name. Balance was not merely a goal. It was the foundation of Jedi identity. But when we strip away tradition, when we silence doctrine, and when we observe the universe without Jedi interpretation, a disturbing realization begins to form. Balance is not how the universe works. The universe does not seek balance. Look outward. Stars are not balanced objects. They are born from violent gravitational collapse, burn in constant internal war, and die in explosions that reshape entire systems. Galaxies do not exist in equilibrium. They collide, merge, tear one another apart, and evolve through destruction. Life itself is not balanced. It grows through extinction events, mutation, adaptation, and suffering. If the Force is generated by all living things, then it is born from imbalance, not harmony. So why would the Force seek stillness? The answer is uncomfortable. It WOULDN single quotes T. Balance as the Jedi defined it is artificial. Jedi never described balance as motion. They described it as calm detachment, emotional neutrality, absence of conflict. This definition does not come from the Force. It comes from fear of chaos. True natural systems oscillate. They surge and recede. They destroy and regenerate. The Jedi replaced this living rhythm with a frozen ideal, a Force that does not scream, does not weep, does not rage. A Force that does not change. That is not balance, that is containment. Why balance needed to be invented? A Force that is emotional is dangerous to authority. If the Force responds to grief, love, and passion, then anyone, anywhere, could touch it deeply. Families, tribes, cultures, worlds. There would be no single interpretation. No centralized order. No council deciding who is worthy. So the Jedi reframed the Force. They turned it into something that required training, discipline, approval, hierarchy. Balance became the justification for control. Balance as a political concept. Notice something subtle but crucial. Jedi balance always coincided with Republic stability, Senate authority, existing power structures. Whenever the galaxy was stable, the Jedi claimed balance existed. Whenever upheaval threatened the system, the Jedi declared imbalance. Balance was not cosmic. It was convenient. A balanced Force meant no revolutions, no emotional leaders, no unpredictable awakenings. It meant continuity. And continuity favors institutions, not truth. The Force without Jedi interpretation. When we observe the Force acting independently of Jedi philosophy, patterns emerge. The Force empowers those in emotional crisis, responds strongly to loss and detachment, produces visions through fear, and hope intensifies during war, not peace. This is not the behavior of an energy field seeking balance. This is the behavior of something alive, responsive, and evolving. The Jedi did not listen to this behavior. They reinterpreted it as a flaw. Why stillness was mistaken for wisdom. The Jedi associated calm with enlightenment. But calm is not wisdom. Calm can be avoidance. Calm can be suppression. Calm can be fear disguised as discipline. A Jedi who feels nothing is not balanced. They are disconnected. And a disconnected interpreter of the Force is the most dangerous kind because they mistake silence for truth. The problem with eternal balance. The Jedi believed balance could be achieved once and then maintained forever. But no natural system works this way. Eternal balance is entropy. It is decay disguised as peace. By attempting to lock the Force into a permanent state, the Jedi turned balance into a static prison, and anything living that is trapped long enough will attempt escape violently. Why imbalance was inevitable. Every suppressed emotion entered the Force as tension. Every forbidden attachment added pressure. Every denied grief echoed through the energy field. The Force did not reject. Imbalance. It absorbed it. Until imbalance became the only way to move again. The Sith did not emerge because balance failed. They emerged because balance succeeded too well. The dark side as motion, not evil. The Jedi called the dark side corruption. But corruption of what? Of stillness. The dark side introduces change, will, direction, personal desire. It destabilizes rigid systems. That is why the Jedi feared it, not because it destroys life, but because it breaks cages. False balance requires enforcement. True balance would not need an order to protect it. True balance would occur naturally, but Jedi balance required surveillance. Child separation, forbidden, text, exile, and execution. A balance that must be defended by force is not balance. It is fragile ideology. The Force always corrects artificial systems. History reveals a cycle. Whenever the Jedi become dominant, the Force produces extremes. Prophecies intensify. Chosen ones appear. Galactic collapse follows. This is not coincidence. This is correction. The Force does not punish darkness. It punishes monopoly. Balance was a narrative, not a truth. The Jedi needed a story that justified their authority, their sacrifices, their certainty. Balance became that story, but the Force never confirmed it. It only endured it until it no longer could. The quiet truth the Jedi never faced. What if balance is not peace? What if balance is movement between extremes? What if the Force was never meant to be controlled, only experienced? And what if every attempt to define it was already a violation? The Jedi believed they were protecting the galaxy from chaos. But perhaps chaos was never the enemy. Perhaps it was the pulse of life itself, and perhaps the greatest imbalance in galactic history was not the rise of the Sith, but the moment the Jedi decided knew what balance was supposed to be. The Jedi claimed to serve the will of the Force. This phrase was repeated so often for so many generations that it stopped sounding like a belief and began to sound like fact. But belief repeated long enough becomes doctrine, and doctrine, when protected by power, becomes invisible. So let us slow down. Let us strip this claim to its bones. Did the Jedi truly serve the Force? Or did they do something far more dangerous? Did they attempt to manage it? Service does not require control. To serve something is to listen to it. To submit to its rhythms. To accept its unpredictability. To allow it to change you. But control requires structure. Rules. Boundaries. Enforcement. When we observe the Jedi Order honestly, without reverence, we do not see servants. We see administrators. The Force was treated as a resource. The Jedi did not approach the Force as a mystery. They approached it as something that could be measured. Drain accounts, quantified potential. Younglings were sorted by aptitude. Masters were elevated by perceived wisdom. The Force became something that could be optimized. This is not spiritual humility. This is resource management. Why the Jedi centralized the Force. If the Force were allowed to awaken naturally across the galaxy, chaos would follow. Different cultures would interpret it differently. Different moralities would emerge. Different relationships with power would form. So the Jedi centralized Force. Knowledge. One temple. One doctrine. One approved path. They turned the Force into something that required authorization. You could not simply feel the Force. You had to be trained to feel it correctly. The Jedi defined correct. Connection to the Force was no longer personal. It became standardized. Emotionless. Detached. Disciplined. Anything outside this model was labeled dangerous. This allowed the Jedi to invalidate non-Jedi Force. Traditions erase, alternative interpretations declare. Entire cultures misguided or dark balance became the justification for cultural erasure. Why children were taken so young? This is one of the most unsettling aspects of Jedi practice. Children were removed before attachments could form. Why? The official answer was compassion. The real reason was predictability. Attachment creates individuality. Individuality creates interpretation. Interpretation creates deviation. The Jedi could not risk Force users developing personal relationships with the Force. They needed uniformity. Emotion was the enemy of management. Emotion cannot be standardized. Grief feels different to everyone. Love takes infinite forms. Fear produces unpredictable responses. From a management perspective, emotion is chaos. So the Jedi reframed emotion as a pathology, something to be cured, something to be overcome, not because emotion was evil, but because it could not be controlled. The Jedi created a Force elite. Only those trained by the Order were considered legitimate Force users. Others were untrained, dangerous, corrupted. This allowed the Jedi to monopolize spiritual authority. They did not merely guide the Force. They licensed it. Balance became a compliance tool. Once balance was established as sacred, dissent became heresy. If someone questioned Jedi doctrine, they were not disagreeing, they were threatening balance. This reframing made opposition immoral by definition. It is one of the oldest tools of institutional power. The Jedi and the Republic. A mutual dependency. The Jedi claimed neutrality, but they were deeply entangled with the Republic. They served as generals, enforcers, intelligence agents. In return, the Republic validated Jedi authority. Balance conveniently aligned with political order. Instability was treated as spiritual failure. Why the Jedi feared unmanaged Force awakening. Untrained Force sensitivity is dangerous, but not for the reason the Jedi claimed. It is dangerous to hierarchy. A galaxy where people awaken naturally to the Force is a galaxy the Jedi cannot govern. So awakenings outside the Order were treated as crises. Balance required suppression. The Sith were a management failure. The Sith were not merely dark Jedi. They were a system failure. They represented what happens when Force sensitivity emerges without Jedi permission. The Force resisted being managed. The Force does not behave like a system. It behaves like a living field. The harder the Jedi tried to regulate it, the more violently it responded. Power concentrated. Visions intensified. Extremes emerged. This was not imbalance. It was resistance. The Jedi mistook authority for alignment. They believed that because they controlled the Force, they understood it. But control is not understanding. And authority is not wisdom. Jedi listened to doctrine more than experience. The tragedy of the Jedi were not evil. They were afraid. Afraid that without structure, the galaxy would burn. Afraid that without control, the Force would destroy everything. So they chose certainty over truth, management over mystery. Question the Jedi never asked. What if the Force does not want to be managed? What if chaos is not failure, but expression? What if the Jedi were not servants, but caretakers who refused to let go? Closing reflection. The Jedi believed they were guiding the Force toward balance. But perhaps the Force was waiting for them to stop guiding it at all. Because a river does not need permission to flow. And the moment you try to regulate its course, it floods. From the very beginning, the Jedi framed the dark side as a corruption, a stain, a sickness, a fall. It was spoken of in whispers, warned against in teachings, and punished without mercy. But there is a subtle contradiction hidden inside this narrative, one so obvious that it disappears in plain sight. If the dark side were truly an external evil, if it were foreign to the Force, then why does the Force respond to it so naturally? Why does it arise again and again, not randomly, but precisely when systems become rigid, stagnant, and closed? The answer the Jedi never allowed themselves to consider is this: the dark side is not the opposite of the Force. It is the Force in motion. Evil is a moral judgment, not a cosmic one. The universe does not recognize good and evil. Stars do not burn morally. Black holes do not consume wickedly. Death does not discriminate ethically. Morality is a sentient framework. Story intelligent beings tell themselves to survive together. But the Force predates morality. It existed before language, before law, before philosophy. So when the Jedi labeled the dark side as evil, they were not describing the Force, they were judging it. What the dark side actually represents: strip away the fear. Strip away the doctrine. What remains? The dark side emerges through strong emotion, personal will, desire to act, refusal to submit. It is not inherently destructive. It is directional. The dark side moves towards something. Change, revenge, love, freedom, control. These can become monstrous, but they are not born that way. They become monstrous when suppressed too long. Why the Jedi could not allow change. The Jedi Order depended on continuity. Their authority relied on tradition, predictability, emotional restraint, hierarchical obedience. Change threatens all of these. A force that encourages transformation cannot be governed. A force that responds to passion cannot be standardized. So the Jedi framed change as danger. They did not fear darkness. They feared loss of control. The dark side is evolutionary pressure in biology. Mutation is not evil. It is how life adapts. Most mutations fail. Some succeed. But without mutation, life stagnates and dies. The dark side functions similarly within the Force. It introduces volatility. Tests boundaries. Forces systems to adapt or collapse. From the Jedi's perspective, this was unacceptable. From the Force's perspective, it was necessary. Why darkness always emerges during Jedi dominance. Observe the pattern. Whenever the Jedi are at their strongest, the Sith return. Force sensitivity intensifies. Chosen ones emerge. The galaxy destabilizes is not coincidence. This is counterbalance, but not the balance the Jedi imagine. It is correction through disruption. The dark side is what happens when the Force can no longer breathe. Suppression turns emotion into catastrophe. Emotion denied does not disappear. It concentrates. Fear becomes paranoia. Love becomes obsession. Anger becomes annihilation. The Jedi trained their members to deny emotion, but the Force still absorbed it. Each suppressed feeling added tension to the energy field. The dark side is not temptation. It is release. And release, after centuries of denial, is never gentle. Why the dark side feels powerful. The Jedi claimed the dark side was seductive because it was easy, but this is misleading. The dark side feels powerful because it aligns with authenticity. It allows immediate response, emotional honesty, personal agency. Jedi path requires constant self-denial. The dark side removes the mask. That is why it feels intoxicating, not because it lies, but because it tells the truth too quickly. The Jedi weaponized fear of the dark side. By labeling the dark side as inherently corruptive, the Jedi ensured obedience. Any questioning of doctrine could be dismissed as darkness. Any emotional deviation could be punished. This created a culture of fear. Fear of feeling, fear of desire, fear of individuality. Ironically, fear is the very emotion the Jedi claimed led to the dark side. The Sith were not pure darkness. Sith are often portrayed as embodiments of evil. But look closer. They seek freedom from restraint, mastery of self-definition. These are not evil desires. They become evil when unchecked, just as Jedi control becomes tyranny when absolute. The Sith are not monsters by nature. They are what happens when the only alternative to suppression is extremity. Why balance could not include the dark side. If the Jedi admitted the dark side had a role, their entire ideology would collapse. It would mean Emotion is valid, desire is natural, change is inevitable, it would mean balance is dynamic, not static. And dynamic systems cannot be ruled absolutely. So the dark side had to be demonized. Anakin's fall. Revisited. Anakin does not fall because he embraces darkness. He falls because he is denied integration. He is forced to choose between total emotional denial, total emotional explosion. There is no middle path. No place for grief. No place for love. No place for fear. The dark side is not what corrupts him. It is what accepts him. The dark side as the shadow of the Jedi. Psychologically, the shadow is the part of the self that is denied. The more it is denied, the stronger it becomes. The Jedi created the galaxy's shadow, every suppressed feeling. Every forbidden desire. Every silenced truth. The dark side is not separate from the light. It is the light's unacknowledged half. Why? Destruction was inevitable. A system that denies half of existence cannot survive. Eventually, the shadow takes control, not because it wants to destroy, but because it wants to be seen. The fall of the Jedi was not a failure of balance. It was the consequence of refusing wholeness. The Force does not choose sides. The Force does not favor light or dark. It favors movement. Where there is stagnation, it introduces chaos. Where there is rigidity, it introduces breakage. The dark side is one of its tools, a brutal one but effective. The truth the Jedi could never accept. The dark side was never the enemy. It was the message. Change is coming. Adapt or fall. Integrate or collapse. Jedi chose denial. So the Force chose fire. What if the greatest lie the Jedi ever told was that darkness was something to be destroyed? What if it was something to be understood? And what if the galaxy burned not because the dark side rose, but because it was never allowed to exist in the light? The Jedi believed prophecy was guidance, a gift from the Force, a glimpse into what must be. But prophecy is not instruction. It is warning, and the Jedi misunderstood this distinction in a way that doomed them, because prophecy does not exist to preserve systems. It exists when systems are about to break. Why the Force speaks in prophecy only during crisis. Notice when prophecies appear, not during peace, not during harmony. Not when balance, real or imagined, seems stable. Prophecy emerges when the Force is under strain. It surfaces like pressure escaping a fault line, a tremor before collapse. The Jedi interpreted prophecy as reassurance, but the Force was sounding an alarm. The Chosen One prophecy was a symptom, not a plan. The prophecy of the Chosen One did not outline a future. It described a correction. Balance would be restored, but not preserved. Restoration implies something has become unnatural. The Jedi assumed imbalance meant the rise of the dark side. They never considered that they themselves were the imbalance. Why the prophecy was vague by design. Force does not give clear instructions. Clarity enables control. Ambiguity forces interpretation, and interpretation reveals bias. The Jedi read the prophecy through their own fear. They assumed balance meant their survival. Restoration meant continuation. The Chosen One would serve the Order. They could not imagine a future where balance required their end. Prophecy as a psychological anchor. Prophecy gave the Jedi comfort. It suggested inevitability. It allowed them to believe events were unfolding as intended. This removed urgency, removed doubt, removed accountability. Why question doctrine if destiny guarantees correction? Prophecy became a sedative. Why the Jedi never questioned the cost. Prophecy never promised peace. It never promised mercy. It never promised survival. Jedi added those assumptions themselves. They believed balance would feel like victory, but balance, when restoring a distorted system, feels like loss. Anakin was not chosen to save. He was chosen to end. This is the truth the Jedi could not accept. Anakin did not represent hope. He represented termination. The end of Jedi monopoly, Sith extremism, false moral certainty was not meant to preserve balance. He was meant to reset the equation. Why the Jedi tried to shape the prophecy. Once the Jedi believed they understood destiny, they attempted to manage it. They trained Anakin, restricted him, directed him. But prophecy cannot be managed. The moment you attempt to control it, you become the thing it must correct. The Force uses collapse as a tool. Systems do not relinquish power voluntarily. They calcify. They protect themselves. So the team themselves. Force does what nature always does. It introduces stress until collapse becomes inevitable. The Chosen One was not a hero. He was pressured. Why Anakin had to suffer. Suffering intensifies the Force. It deepens emotional resonance. It sharpens connection. Anakin's pain was not accidental. It was the mechanism. The Jedi tried to reduce his suffering. The Force amplified it. The Jedi's fatal misinterpretation. They believed the prophecy would end the Sith. They did not realize it would also end them. Because balance cannot exist when one philosophy dominates, even a philosophy of light. The Force does not preserve institutions. Institutions exist to sustain themselves. The Force exists to sustain life. When institutions obstruct life's evolution, the Force removes them. The Jedi mistook longevity for alignment. Why the prophecy could only end in fire. Gentle reform was impossible. The Jedi could not imagine change without collapse. So collapse was the only language the Force had left. Anakin, as a living contradiction, he embodied love and rage, hope and fear, creation and destruction. He could not be contained. So he broke everything. That was not failure. That was fulfillment. Sith were also meant to fall. The prophecy did not favor darkness. It eliminated extremes. The Sith's obsession with domination was as unsustainable as Jedi repression. Balance required annihilating both. Why balance followed the fall after the destruction. The Force quieted extremes, receded, new possibilities emerged. This is balance, not peace, but openness. The Jedi feared the truth of prophecy because the truth was unbearable. They were not the solution. They were the problem.